tell you a quick story about why I'm so interested in Balboa Park and actually interested in San Diego. In 1974, I was 15 years old and came with a group down to a bike race in Balboa Park, right there at Marston Point. It was a quick criterion. Went around that little loop there for like 25 times. Never been to San Diego, never been to Southern California. And we drove down. I was in the back of a pickup truck, and we stopped, and we slept somewhere in a parking lot. And all night long, I heard all these weird sounds. Where the heck are we? We're in the zoo parking lot. And so that was my first introduction to San Diego, was wild animals. And then when we went over to the race at Marston Point, I was just flabbergasted about, there's an island over there? Is that an island? Is that a bridge going over? Where's that? This and that. It was so diverse, the view out of that area. Of course, that view isn't quite as good as it was back in the mid-'70s, but it really made me want to move to San Diego, number one. And number two, at the time I was still in high school and didn't know what I wanted to do, but it really got me interested in landscape architecture. So just one trip got me destined to move to San Diego and then to get into the profession. And since that time, since '81, we've never lived more than a mile from Balboa Park, and eventually moved from Mission Hills to Vancouver Hill. And now I'm only 5 blocks from the edge of Balboa Park. So when I got involved with, when I had retired 2 years ago, I did want to keep being involved in different groups, and someone got me involved in San Diego Commons. But I wanted to make sure that there was a way to look at reconnecting the park. A lot of the effort, and I'll start flipping through this guy, as part of San Diego Commons, their biggest thing at the time was to look at covering over the freeways with parkland. And so the goal there was not only to reconnect the city as these gaps were formed by the different freeway systems, but it was also about generating new parkland. So when I was asked to get involved, I said, I really don't necessarily agree with that philosophy to spend $1 billion in creating parkland when all of the south end of West Mesa is completely underutilized, and all of Inspiration Point still hasn't been developed. And to me, it's more about connecting, getting people to it is much more important than creating the parkland. But anyway, so there's a lot of us in San Diego Commons, we kind of made this shift from a lid to looking at how to reconnect. But when the group was first formed, they looked at all of the places where I-5 cut communities, cut through the communities. And since there were starting to become some funding sources, both at the federal level and at the state level, to reconnect communities, they really worked pretty hard on the Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, and there's 2 parts of that, and then also Sherman Heights to try to find funding. Of course, there's been funding now for a reconnect project for Barrio Logan. But when that happened, we got that up and going. We said, let's now focus on Balboa Park and see what we can do. And that's when I got involved, and that's when we tried to shift this idea of let's really look at how we can reconnect the park. And then look at how the community and the city can actually increase the amenities and facilities and capacity of West Mesa, just like Morley Field is to North Park and Golden Hill is to Golden Hill. A lot of the park is being used for neighborhood and community park purposes, and West Mesa has never really been that. So this originally, this is the idea of greening the gap. You can see a really large area of trying to cover I-5. We never got estimates for it, but we know it's somewhere between $1 and $2 billion to do. And so that's like, all kind of scratching our heads. And Rob Quigley finally also looked at it and said, I'm kind of old and I want to see something done. There's no way I'm going to be around to see this. So he said, let's really try to switch it up and see what we can really start talking about. I never like to look at suggesting what can happen in the future until you look back and see what's happened in the past. So I always look for a historic context of what's actually happened in the area. And now that I'm retired, I'm learning a lot more about Balboa Park, which is fun because I didn't know a lot of these things that I'm going to tell you. Maybe a lot of you don't either. But the southwest corner of Balboa Park was really a battleground before the Pan American Exposition. between a lot of very famous architects and landscape architects. So you had the Olmsted brothers in the one case shown on the right here, where they were designing, and you can see in the one map onto the right, your right, was where the Pan American Exposition was first proposed at. And it came all the way down to where Balboa Stadium is, and Rest School, and then went up and it stayed on those lawyers. And Olmsted's, their opinion as to why it should have been there says, we were delighted with the southwestern site because of its proximity to developed sections of the city. Remember at the time, there was nothing going up on the sides. It was just the city down there. It wasn't a big city at all at that point. But also the views of the city from that location and views of the harbor from the higher locations and the irregular topography that happened down there. You go out there now and you don't even realize what was Spanish Canyon. Mostly all got filled in. And it's really, some people call it Gold Gulch, where the lower portion of where the Japanese Friendship Garden is, and all the way up to Alcazar Garden, that was Spanish Canyon. But when you come out to where Starlight Bowl was, that was all the canyon that ran all the way through there. That all got filled in. But anyway, the other thing that they always said that it's important to, and this was kind of a Olmsted, both Frederick Olmsted and his two sons' philosophy, was when you do parks, especially big urban parks, you need to pin down the corners of the park. If you don't pin them down with investments and uses, then there's development pressure and political pressure to use those for other things. And that's exactly what happened on the southwest corner of the park. So the Olmsted brothers were fighting for a long time and developed this one particular plan. I'll show you where it actually lands on the real world. But the other people that were on the committee, primarily Spreckles, who ran pretty much the entire trolley line throughout San Diego at the time, and he was up, those were not public agencies. His model was to buy up very cheap land, extend a trolley to it, and then it became valuable land. And so he was always looking for that, but he was a major member of the committee to form the Pan American Exposition. And him, along with David Collier, kind of got together and turned the site from the southwest corner to where it was actually built. And that allowed then for Spreckles to extend the 4th and 5th Avenue extensions that come up through Uptown and the Park Boulevard extension that went all the way one time to where the big fountain is at the end of the Prado. That's where the trolley station was. And that's where most people came in to the exposition in 2015. So there was kind of some ulterior motives, I think, in there, that he would get that commission and get it paid for by others, and then he got the benefit of and continued to extend those lines north of those points. And so David Collier and Spreckles both kind of pushed in that way. And Frank Allen was kind of the one who ended up taking over when the Olmsted brothers resigned, because when this happened to him, said they had all this planned out, and when they weren't around, the committee kind of met without them and said, oh, we're going to change the site. And so they resigned from it, and only George Marston was the one who was really, of those that had a lot of influence, were trying to keep the southwestern part of the site. But Frank Allen and John Spreckles and David Collier were all pushing the other direction. The other part of this clash of the titans is that when originally Irving Gill was trying to get the commission for doing a lot of the buildings, but then he had to compete. Bertram Goodhue got the contract, and they let Irving Gill do a little bit of the work. But those two were at complete odds with each other in terms of architectural style. Gill's known for simplicity and cubism, and Bertram Goodhue did extraordinary amounts of ornamentation related to Spanish colonial. And so the two of them didn't get along, but also Irving Gill resigned from his commission for the area when he found that Frank Allen, who was running all the contracts basically, was getting some type of graft back from the suppliers. And Irving Gill found that, and he says, I don't want to be involved with this anymore. So the exposition was not a smooth going thing, and it really did have this false start on the southwest corner. But why that's important is, and I just call this, let the plans begin. So in 1910, the Olmsted brothers were designing this portion of the area in the southwest corner. What you're seeing there in yellow were a series of bridges that the Olmsted brothers had proposed to connect up across Cabrillo Gorge itself, or Cabrillo Canyon, which is where 163 eventually went. And also where Spanish Canyon went up through the area. And then this other connection that goes down over to the beginning of the park wasn't meant to be a bridge, but just a major entry point. They really wanted that to be a major entry point that would then get you over to the other mesa by a bridge. And so I think that was a really good idea of what they had. And again, it's hard for people to think of this area without two freeways going through it, but it was a long time before freeways went through it. And there was a pretty substantial amount of loss of parkland as a result of not pitting down that corner. So in 1910, this kind of happened, but by 1911, the Olmsteds kind of resigned from it, and that plan was kind of thrown out the door. But when you look at some of the aerials here, so that's the overlay of where those bridges, the bridges where the Olmsted brothers had proposed, with the condition in 1941 before 163 went through. You can see what was basically a dirt road. Some of it may have been a little bit paved in 163 going through that, but this is definitely pre-freeway. And so, and I don't think the reflecting pond, I'm not sure how many years the reflecting pond under the bridge survived, but I don't think it was around in 41. But also one of the things, the Balboa Stadium, I didn't even know this, but it was one of the few things that was put in where the Olmsted brothers suggested to go. So there wasn't a lot that came from that Olmsted plan that was implemented. This one smaller bridge that you see at that runs from east to west, the one on its own, that was a bridge that was put across Cabrillo. That was also in the Olmsted's original plan, but it got took out when the 163 went through. So you see the same area in 1948 when the SR 163 was built through. I would say in general, it was much more sensitively done and did not gobble up as much area. It did gobble up a lot because of the long linear stretch of it, but compared to when I-5 came in, it was just a huge grading and exercise that took away so much of the corner of the park. So so when you see it here again in 53, but just, I think I-5 went in 63. So again, you don't see much of that there, but then there's with I-5 going through, you can see how much bigger all that was. I mean, it's just a spaghetti of roadways. It was a time frame when traffic engineers and transportation planners thought everything needed to be a high-speed off-ramp. And so everything was done that way. And so for those that sometimes walk down 6th Avenue, that one off-ramp that comes over to 6th Avenue, and it has that free left turn, it's super dangerous for pedestrians. But that was the mentality back then. And so it really gobbled up much more land than it probably should have. I've got some of the older images here. So 1950, this is kind of like that pristine when the exposition opened. But take a look at that entrance area that was basically off of 9th Avenue, and that semicircular area. That was a major entrance to the park. And right now, when you look at these two colored dots, I put them in there for reference. The fire alarm building and Marston Point itself, where the flagpole is, all that land down from there, that was all taken by the freeway. Because right now, the fire alarm building is not very far from the freeway itself. They cut it as close as they could in that particular area. But just that connectivity that had occurred to the community in this corner, not only at the 6th Avenue area, but the 9th Avenue and everything in East Village had a way to get up into the park itself. That was the corner of Date and 6th Avenue, where basically where that very difficult pedestrian crossing is on 6th Avenue. That's what it looked like on the corner. So you can even see that slight landform that goes up to Marston Point down here on the corner. So, but obviously everything was pretty much. There was a lot that City Park. It changed its name for the exposition to Balboa Park. But City Park had a lot of stuff that a number of folks, including Kate Sessions, had been doing for this portion of the park. And so there actually was a very large amount of tree cover on the West Mesa, much more than there is now. So many mature trees have grown up and have kind of fallen over. So, but for the exposition itself, 6th Avenue and the double row of palms was a major feature also to get people up there, because the trolley wasn't on 6th, but it was over on 5th, and so this was really cleaned up at the time. But you can see it was a dirt road and a dirt path at that point in time. And I also look at this and say, this is probably the only time there was a continuous set of double row trees that were of the same height. And it's a mess now. You know, they're all different heights, and every time a tree's died, it's never been replaced. So it doesn't have that effect of what the original intent was on it. Again, if you look at this in 1932, before the SR 163 went through, all that urban edge that was next to this area would have been ideal if it was kind of preserved as the corner of the park, but that just didn't happen. And I think this is a good one, looking back to the north in Balboa Stadium. Before it had, a lot of this stuff had been torn down. This was at its glory, I would say, in terms of its architectural style and where it was sitting at. Russ School has been there for a very long period of time. But where I say the Cabrillo Canyon bridges, that was a nice bridge that went across there that was taken out by the 163 project. And then, so I think that graphic down there is pretty reminiscent of the spaghetti of off-ramps that we have in this location. You know, it was planned for that, but it was really taking a big gorge out of the whole south end of Balboa Park is really what happened. So when you take a look at it, the original park acreage was 1,400 acres in the park. So SR 163 took out 62, almost 63 acres, and I-5, originally 101, takes about 59 acres out of it. And the high school's, I say City College, but it's really not City College because the Russ Boulevard is kind of the end of the park. But really, Russ School evolved into the high school portion of it. So most all of the loss of land for the park came from this corner. Now there's a lot that is associated with the maintenance yard off of the Persian Drive area. Obviously, the whole Balboa Hospital was something that was taken away during the different time frames, and the Arizona landfill. But those didn't remove the lands themselves. They're still in the park. It's just that you can't use it as much for recreation. But this corner down here, it was taken permanently out where there's no access whatsoever across it. So again, when you overlay, in this case, a 1964 freeway aerial background, the things that were really lost by this, that semicircle that I show there, that was right up against Cortez Hill, and it wasn't a gap there. It was a continuous landform, basically. It wasn't a bridge. It was the actual major entrance to Balboa Park. And then the other thing that was lost was the whole idea of the Beta Park link, and I'll show you that on the next slide. That was supposed to be able to come through this area, original connections, but the freeway removed that from ever happening. The landform itself is a steep cut on the freeway, whereas before it was a nice landform that went over the front of that. And then there were a lot of viewpoints down in this area that you could get to before, but now you can't because the freeway kind of took out those lands. So this is kind of an overlay of Nolan's plan for the Beta Park. And you can see the overlay of the construction of I-5 through that area pretty much made it impossible to follow the original plan in the first place. I don't know if it would ever would have happened, but it couldn't happen the way that Nolan had envisioned it after the freeway went in. Right, so a lot of this, when you talk about connections, you really need to understand what are the problems in the southwest corner of the park now, and what can we actually try to address. So the first thing we do is kind of look at the lands that were taken. So you can see the different colors here. They are pretty substantial, and there's really not much of the park left. There's not much that comes down to it yet. You pretty much have to go all the way over to Golden Hill to get to an area where it's connected to the community and pretty much 6th Avenue on the uptown side or Bankers Hill side. Those still have an edge to it, but everything in the downtown and East Village and portions of the Golden Hill were basically isolated from it. So the problem there is the lost land itself. And then secondly, the right-of-ways were kind of designed not necessarily for people walking or bikes. And so a lot of them were high speeds. Now, like Pershing has been modified with the new bike facility and the walking facility, so that's been resolved. But this idea of running in all these things, because really Pershing was like an extension of the freeway up quite a ways, super high speed off ramps and everything. So that part's been fixed, but we still have some isolated areas, and these freeways really made it so you had more of cutting up of the park with West Mesa and Central Mesa and Inspiration Point. And now they were all divided by major freeway systems that couldn't allow you to even get from those two sides of West Mesa and Central Mesa without going up to the Cabrillo Bridge. So access from that standpoint, and then those gaps of the freeway is primarily between Cortez Hill and West Mesa, the south side. West Mesa and Central Mesa are those gaps that are important there. But we can't forget about Golden Hill Park and that whole swath that runs through there of Pershing Drive of getting over to Inspiration Point. And to make Inspiration Point a real park that would be utilized, you need to improve some of the connections to it. You need to actually make a park there first, but this would help connect a lot of the different parts of the park. And then, so when you do reconnect those things, the bridges that we're showing here, with the number 2 floating on it, these are the solutions to those cuts, because it allows you to get all the downtown area in East Village up to the park without going all the way over to 6 or going up Park Boulevard. And then the West Mesa, Central Mesa, the Palisades at this end, it's kind of not much activity going on. And a lot of folks are always coming across the bridge and looking for parking spots everywhere. And a lot of them don't even come onto the south side over here by the aerospace, where there's typically a lot of parking. It's, for some reason, an underutilized area. So that connection would actually make some real improvements. And then again, that Inspiration Point being connected to Golden Hill Park is also advanced. And then those high-speed roads, like I said, the off-ramp where this number 3 is, of where it drops onto 6th Avenue, that's not exactly the best situation. Park Boulevard is usually fairly good, but the bridges themselves are a little bit, it's not a nice walking environment to walk across there. So there may be some chances for upgrades on that. And then Florida Canyon, there's been some talk about getting a bridge that extends from Prado all the way across Florida Canyon. We don't really have that in our plan because it's a little bit further out. But I do have a picture of what that might actually be. And then these would be the existing bridges that could be improved as well to solve some of those problems where that number 3 is on the pedestrian bridge that comes across, as well as Park Boulevard and portions of Pershing and how that's handled down there. Again, most of what's in Florida Canyon itself and Zoo Drive and all of that has been improved now with bike facilities and good walking facilities, so that's finally taken care of. So making the right connection, so it's not just about where do you do it, and you'll see that most of our concepts here are not necessarily about what this is going to look like or from an architectural or engineering standpoint, because it's too early in the process. It really is, you have to really establish the need for it. And in this case, if you really take a look at what Caltrans did to the area, there was no mitigation back to the city for what was done with the freeway that ran through there. And most all the transportation agencies, I would say that it was the federal government doing it. I don't know what's going to happen on that, but I'm sure it's not going to be a real interest of the next administration to reconnect communities. But the state was also doing that. And they realized that there's a lot of things that they need to fix that Caltrans created problems in communities. So there's a really good case to make about how Balboa Park was cut off from downtown and East Village, that we can really look at that may be a possible funding source. And then secondly, with Balboa Park starting a new master plan starting up here, we have the opportunity to get these things in there. If it doesn't get into the park master plan, it has no chance of surviving. But this is a good time for us to get the idea across on it. So this is the 2 areas that you kind of see roughly where we're talking about. The one bridge, what we're just calling the Marston Gateway Bridge, that connects up with Tweed Street Park, and then over close to where the fire alarm building is, would be a much wider bridge. It would allow emergency vehicles on it, but not vehicles. So it's really a pedestrian and bike bridge, but it's also one that would be more of an urban plaza that has a lot more things going on with it. And then the one that goes over to Palisades itself lands over there pretty much by the north side of the Aerospace Museum, but it would be a lot skinnier. It's really just to get it over there, to get peds primarily and bikes across there. Cabrillo Ridge was never really redesigned even with Caltrans up there to make it better for bikes. It's still a pretty tight element, so this would be one of those locations that you could do that. Right, so we have just 3 concepts for it, and then, again, they're not that in-depth thought through, because if you go too far and then you do public outreach, people think that you've gone much further without that opportunity of hearing what the public really wants on this. So in this particular one, what we're talking about doing here is to really extend some parkland in Caltrain's right away where they're not going to expand in the future. Basically work with some retaining walls that create some plazas as an entry to this bridge. So, and then the same thing on the opposite side of that is turn that into some areas where there's lots of viewing points across that bridge, and it really opens it up. Now, in addition to that, we have a lot of pergolas or other types of shade structures, but we really have to analyze where some of those viewpoints are. Even though the buildings in downtown have blocks in the views, slightly cantered off towards the southeast and to the west, the views are great, especially if you can get over the freeway. The views out to the harbor are great, and you kind of see that when you're driving sometimes. But you're driving and you're through there in a few seconds. But when you can walk and stop and see the whole city and the bay, I think those are kind of important. And then a series of trails would connect it up to the other bridge that goes across. And in those cases, it had some major landings too that provide you with some of those really good viewing points that could occur. And this is one where basically you want to get one bridge to do 2 things. So this is kind of crossing in a curvilinear style that crosses over and has a touchdown point close to our building that also makes its way all the way over to the other side. And then the third way is to do it the way the Olmsted brothers had. This is actually where they had proposed the bridge. Now, of course, the one going north-south, there wasn't a need for a bridge there, but it's meant to be a major promenade under the Olmsted plan. So we just looked at these 3 particular options. Now, both the Bankers Hill group, which I'm on, is pushing really hard to take what the city did in the city parks master plan to really get more amenities and uses in the West Mesa area. Uptown has probably got the largest growth of any area in the city at this point based on the new plan. There'll be 50,000 more people in the area, and we already have a huge shortage of parkland. As a matter of fact, the Park and Rec Board turned down the plan saying you're not doing anything for resolving the park deficit that's already there. So a minimum has to happen. There has to be a lot more stuff happening that, especially the south end, but all of West Mesa. Doesn't mean you have to change the character of it. There's a lot of land there, but you need to be able to have a few more things. And so we've been suggesting that the fire alarm building be turned into part of what would be a new community center with a recreation center next to it as a new element. And then have group picnic areas down there. We need to really activate this end of the park. Again, it's very underutilized. Someone torched the bathroom building that's down there. There's a lot of homeless problems down in that area. So that's a result of it not being very activated. So this all goes hand in hand with increasing what can happen on especially the south end of West Mesa. The other thing that's interesting, when Balboa Drive was restriped to allow more parking, that was to the benefit of Central Mesa. But this entire area of the South Palisades still has some real parking issues. And that all this area in orange basically is either on-street or slightly off-street parking. There's a tremendous amount of on-street resources for people to park there and walk across the bridge to the Palisades. So even though the bridge may be, a $15, $20 million bridge to make that work, everyone's talking about building parking structures over there for $40, $50 million. Why not take an easy way at that and capture some parking when there's, especially at special events? And I have seen a lot more people willing to walk across the bridge because there is that supply over there. And that's all part of the experience of a park, is walking. So I don't know why everyone has to feel that they need to get exactly to their destination with the car. So this is one of the advantages to the Central Mesa to consider this in connecting that portion of the park. These are just some very quick, very mass models, just to give you an idea dropped into Google Earth. So you can kind of see what this would look like from the freeway. So this is the one that would go from Tweed Street Park. And this is another view of it. It would be a wide bridge with landscape treatments on it, and it would have a major pathway to the center that could be used for emergency vehicles or police department just for watching over the area. But this is kind of where it lands at, close to the actual fire alarm building. And then the other one would be up further. You can see the Cabrillo Bridge in the background. Again, there's no design put in these bridges, just a sense of where these bridges would be spot where you can kind of see where it would connect between the two. So overall, when you look at how we connect and expand the park resources, the green areas are where there's a lot more opportunity for parkland, for acreage, raw acreage. And I know the city's kind of changed to a qualitative ranking system for park needs instead of acres, but acres still count. It really is important to distribute these. So there's a lot of land areas that are underutilized that could be used a lot in that green. So you can see our Marston Bridge, how that connects up. We've shown kind of a series of trails or walking routes that would allow you to connect an awful lot of this area. And it takes into account even the work that Roger and Mike Steffen are working on in terms of the Russ Boulevard project in the high school that improved promenade on Russ Boulevard and getting up to the pedestrian bridge to make that better, as well as, you know, we really could have a Beta Park, at least walking route down Cedar Street, because that would connect up pretty well with the waterfront. So all these things can really tie a lot of the southwest corner of the park together. And again, most people just don't realize that Golden Boulevard, you know, if there was a bridge put down there, it may not be able to span that width, but there ought to be something down there to connect up so that Inspiration Point can be a real park instead of it being an abandoned set of old building foundations, and that's all you see out there now. But also the existing bridges. There's been a plan for 6th Avenue in terms of adding a wider walkway and starting the double row of palms down there so it continues up 6th Avenue. There's Russ Boulevard itself and how that's going to be handled under the plan that Roger and Michael have been working on. And then you can even see Russ Boulevard down there where that would be also a walking street instead of just being a kind of a back of facilities type street that it is now. The pedestrian bridge, there's been talks about how you might improve that pedestrian bridge itself, and then Park Boulevard, there's been some plans in there. So we don't want to ignore the existing bridges because they really do work, but there's just still some gaps there that we need to fill with some additional bridges. And most people don't realize it, but in the 1989 adopted master plan for Balboa Park, this one bridge down here at Marston Point is in that plan. So it's not something new. It's been on there for quite some period of time. The only difference we did, this was a straight shot across. We wanted to move it over at least a street, because if it gets too close to 6th Avenue, your justification for a bridge kind of goes downhill. If you only got, you know, 3 more blocks to walk over and cross over on 6th Avenue, you know, then it's kind of harder to say. And then that portion of East Village, you know, is further and further away. So we moved it over slightly so it can capture it at more at 9th Street. And then the bridge across Pershing Drive is in the Parks Master Plan. So 2 of the 3 that we're recommending here are already in the plan. And so we want to kind of build on that and get people excited about it. So in the new master plan, it's defined a lot more. Right, so again, I mentioned that we haven't shown designs of it, but we've got a lot of images here of what it could be. You know, when you have a well-designed bridge, not only is functionally it works very well, but iconically and gateway-wise, it can be very dramatic for the city, as the Harbor Drive Bridge is. People know that. I mean, it's a very iconic bridge. So there's a lot of things, you know, we've got examples here that just kind of show how you can handle areas around freeways. Part of it are freeway lids, and these are actually small freeway lids that have either been planned or done. Actually, if anyone's been up to the Presidio Tunnel, that's a really good adaptation of closing the freeway in without it being super large, but you really get a sense of that you're connected. The areas that the old freeway cut, it's very connected to the whole waterfront there of the bay. That one works really well. But we're really not talking about freeway lids because we've moved away from that. They're extremely expensive. So we're really talking about bridges, and they don't have to be one single width, and they don't have to be straight lines. That's really up to the public to kind of decide, and for someone to be hired to actually design that bridge. But it needs to be well designed and well thought out. So it can be curvilinear like this. It can be variable width so that you have all these viewpoints that come off of it. Or if you go with narrow bridges to save money, you can still make them very dynamic, and they can have multiple uses to them. And lighting is important too on how you handle something like this, because it will be so iconic to the nothing else, a couple 100,000 people that drive under it every day, fly over it. Or wide bridge decks themselves, how can you use some of those spaces so you're getting across from point A to B, but the experience can be on the bridge as well. And then, and you can activate these spaces, and that's what's really essential on those bridge decks. But there's also, a lot of it depends on the structural way that you're going to make the bridge work. So you got a traditional one that would probably fit in with a Cabrillo bridge pretty well in the lower left-hand corner. But, a cable stay bridge with a tower, that's kind of fairly well known. Or you express that structure underneath it instead of just being the regular Caltrans columns. You really express that so that people looking at the underside of the bridge get some enjoyment too. Or there's other ways that, through cable type systems that you can do an arch that supports the bridge itself. I guess, one of the things that we like to point out is that actually San Diego has a pretty big tradition with bridges and pedestrian-sized bridges as well. So the Quinn Street or Maple Street bridge itself, or Vermont Street, Spruce Street, these are all ones in my area, and the First Avenue Bridge itself are all great examples of bridges that people really know and that are pretty iconic. Georgia Street Bridge is another one, just a nice short bridge, but a well-designed bridge. But the San Diego Zoo did a really good job on one that crosses the canyon, and these are about the types of links that we're talking about. And so you could do something like that. It all depends on whether or not you're trying to make it really fit into the park and its history, or don't try to imitate history and just make it whatever it needs to be iconic and useful. On the right-hand side there's a picture of the Florida Canyon Bridge, where that would go from the fountain and continue all the way across Florida Canyon to a portion of the landfill. So that's another one that's been proposed. But something like that is pretty simple and interesting. So it is important for these things to be great looking and to be community assets. One of the things of all my years of park planning is about 65% of what people do in parks is a linear activity of walking, jogging, biking, skating. So whatever you do with these paths, they're all part of that solution to provide those types of facilities for a park.
Mike, did you say 65%?
65% of what people do when you do surveys, what do you do in a park, what do you want to do in a park, it comes out about that average. Throughout, I've done probably 40 different park master plans or city park master plans. They always fall at that level. That's what they really want to do. Probably a lot of it is that doctors are telling you, where's your 30 minutes of exercise a day? You need to get out and walk more, right? So part of that is where it's
Excuse me, but a lot of that is because a lot of parks are not activated.
true,
You go to Bryant Park, and you go to some other parks that have a lot of activities,
especially in urban
and then
areas.
you flip that completely.
And
So
there, a lot of that is
park-
the
parks
social
are-
sitting.
The parks don't
watching.
think of activation,
Yeah.
they just think of grass and laying around
Yeah.
and, look but don't touch.
But another high point is people like to sit in an area and watch other people go by. So that is another big one, but there's no reason why the bridge and any terraces associated with it would be doing the same type of thing to activate those spaces. Another thing, since Caltrans actually has a mandate to use their right-of-way for clean energy production. So if we try to approach Caltrans with helping fund this, you could really look at the bridge and supporting some type of production. Now, it doesn't mean that this has to look like the normal solar panels or wind turbines. They can be very, very well done. They actually have PV solar film that you actually can put on, some people call it Gorilla Glass, but it actually basically drops the noise level, and you put the film on there and it produces energy. But the forms of these things can be really unique. Those wind turbines on that lower left are really interesting. They don't look like, your regular wind turbines. But, and then solar panels, they don't have to look like they're all structured. You can really artistically make them look like something very iconic and be really a big part of that bridge. So that might help project the idea of sustainability more, but it also allows Caltrans as an example of how they could use their right-of-way for this. So at this point, I'm actually done with the presentation, so it'd be a good chance to start answering questions.
What about the safety feature? They're talking about putting this netting under this Coronado Bridge and.
Yeah, they do that on the high visibility, iconic bridges, because for some reason, that's where people seem to go when they're really in trouble. So most of these wouldn't need a suicide net, but they do need the treatments on the side to stop someone from jumping or throwing a rock off or those types of things. So the vertical element that prevents that from happening can be through these glass types, there's not much visibility. They can be through a variety of different things, but you definitely have to resolve that part of it. Yeah.
As an embellishment, if the glass floor, for people that have experience, you get rid of their acrophobia.
And it doesn't have to be a continuous glass. It can be areas that you put these slots in. So the really fearful ones have another way to walk over it, and the brave ones walk on it. But I'm surprised how freakish people are on this First Street Bridge. I walk over probably every day, and you know, if you learn to walk in the middle, the thing doesn't sway. And they're all hanging onto the edges like that. So, but some people, you know, there is part of human nature that likes to be scared but not hurt. Other questions?
Mike, did you have any thought of connecting, I mean, since you're crossing 163 again, you thought of relocating the east-west auto traffic onto that more southern bridge and then taking the traffic off of the existing bridge so that you don't have cars going right through the center of the park?
I would say that possibly has a chance if it helps to get funded.
Okay.
If it has a transportation element to it and Central Mesa would really support it,
Right.
but you don't want it to be the dominant thing like Rio's turned into. It's mostly fast cars that move through there. I mean, you do have some wide walkways there, so you feel fairly safe. So that's a possibility, but it wouldn't be a good idea for the Marston Bridge that goes down to
Right.
Tweed Street Park, because then you got people cutting through that neighborhood.
But it's mostly getting the east-west traffic out of the center of the park.
Yeah.
Is what that other thing would
Yeah,
do.
so that's a possibility, but if we interject this into the park master plan, it may evolve into who knows what, but it's not what we are suggesting that makes any difference, is what is an idea that the public can run with and evolve it into what they really think it should be, so. Way in the back?
Yeah, is there any thought, I'll come back to, on the 163, there's the Richmond off-ramp, and then you have that kind of abandoned bridge over it. Was there any thought of trying to, utilizing that because it's already there and be able to kind of create a connection?
Well, I mean, the bridle trail that uses those bridges, it still functions. So they're already part of the solution to start with. So it's not necessarily that, we don't really need to add it there because they are there and they are working. Now, the Quinn Street off-ramp, you know, since that got reconfigured as a one-way, if that had been closed, then that could have been looked at as another way of connecting the two sides, but it's got auto traffic on it. They spent a lot of money. I don't know where that money went. It was just really for guardrails, it looked like to me, but they spent a lot of money on it. Yes.
So, I was very involved in the recent effort to do the Beta Park for sale, which we did. It was successful. We learned a lot of lessons. We have a lot of data that we can share with you. A couple of the lessons were that anytime that you ask people to walk, you gotta have a payoff, whether you're going north or south. So what we found is that the art that we added was good, but you really need to have more stuff at the park. So you have a bigger payoff to motivate people to walk 1.7 miles. You also need to have a lot more activities during the route. There's no retail. Forget about clean and safe, and forget about vandalism, forget about all the stuff that are part of what you need, but we need more food, we need more retail, we need more entertainment. The very successful journeys are really full of that. And we don't. You take Park Boulevard, from the bay to the park, there's very little. You know, around the stadium, yeah, that's some stuff going on. But beyond that, you have a long walk with a McDonald's in between. No bathrooms. So I think that as you go through this effort, you really need to expand your view and not just the bridge itself. Because you'll never get anybody to get to the bridge unless there is a much more value to make the whole journey.
It's a very good point. Some people who are walking for exercise will walk some distance.
Well,
but-
the walk the dog,
Right, and the dogs kind of like their physical
You
trainer.
don't pee in the house,
Yeah.
because it doesn't.
Yeah. But I kind of attribute it to like when you have young kids, I got young grandkids now, their attention gets lost so fast unless you throw things at them that their attention is somewhere else. When I walk on regular urban streets with my grandkids, they start complaining about so much about, oh, my legs hurt, I'm laying all this stuff, and kind of drag them along. But when we get into natural areas, man, they just love that area because there's things along that route that really improves their experience on that. So you have to look at the same thing with adults, and certainly public art and activities all would build on that.
And more retail, more food, more things to look at. You need to be entertained
Sure.
as you walk the thing.
Scott.
Well, yeah, I was gonna mention something along the lines of that. Part of it for me, it comes into the opportunities and constraints kind of analysis you have for this whole region there, that there's so much topography. And getting to your point, there's not a point A to point B so much. Like, I don't know, how many people have been to Tweed Street Park? Okay, a few of us, policy wonks, I guess, right? But if you ask people in East Village, have you been to Tweed Street Park? Which conceivably, this would be a great connection for people who do want to make that 5-6 mile round trip to Balboa Park walk. They won't even know how to get to Tweed Street Park from from this neighborhood.
I've lived here a long time, I've
Yeah.
never heard of it.
And it's a wonderful gem, most of us who raised our hands, right? So I'm just trying to think, like, what is the there for that? The one thing I liked about your plan is calling out for the rec center in a large part of Inspiration Point to be emphasized, to be a there for that kind of thing. But even then, it's kind of going to be a touch to say this is going to be a resource for people who live down here in this dense part of downtown to get them to Balboa Park by foot across 5 through Tweed Street Park. And then once you get to the north side of the park, what is there to do until you get to Laurel? So, is this a case of us designing a dream that is the solution something for the problem, or what is it, right?
Well, the details are what are really important to make that work. And I think it is the public art, the viewing points, interpretive panels, making that clear so when someone gets on part of it, they realize it's, oh, I go to the next spot, before they know it, they're really experiencing something.
So it's not just a Vermont Street Bridge kind of situation where a few blocks connect to a few blocks, and that's a great solution for that.
I'll give you an example. So we were really surprised that even though you have almost 20,000 students on the Park Boulevard route, and you have thousands of people living within 2 blocks of either side of Park Boulevard, it was very hard to get people to walk. It was very hard to get people to walk the Balboa Park, which you would think would be a huge payoff, or the Bay, for that matter. So I don't know if it's an ethos thing that people said you don't like to walk, or there wasn't enough retail. We really cannot find a conclusion to it. I think maybe you just have to put all kinds of stuff in there and get people to start walking. It was very interesting.
There's already the bridge, Yuba Street Bridge, which I think is not well known, that connects the Central Mesa to the West Mesa. And I live right there, and I walk my dog across that all the time. And it's an example. I mean, it is heavily utilized by dog walkers, and runners. But it's pretty steep, it's up and down. I would appreciate it if you could work into your, hopes for Balboa Park to improve that bridge. It's pretty funky. I mean, a lot of people would hesitate walking that way. But that's an existing one that's already functioning that way and could be improved. My question is, Sandag, are gas tax funds distributed through Sandag available for projects like what you're
If
talking
you can
about?
show the active transportation component, how that allows connections for folks that, money can be spent on that. But
And
if
money,
it's purely recreational, it's a little bit tougher.
and lots of money is already spent on the Pershing Drive,
Right.
bike lanes everywhere, so come on, let's do it.
I'm sorry to talk so much, but we spent a year and a half working with Caltrans to do some mitigation to the bridge over I-5 on Park Boulevard. Landscaping, nope, that's dangerous. Murals to mitigate the sound, nope, that's dangerous. So after a year and a half working with them, and by the way, they were trying. They finally said, well, whatever you do, you have to take full liability responsibility for anything that happens on that bridge. So normally, they had no money to do anything. We had to do everything, but then we had to take full liability. And by the way, we were working within the city and Caltrans, and we were in between. We finally gave up. So that's a real challenge.
It is, but with enough persistence, the SR-15 bridge decks that I worked on, started on those in the 90s. Got some improvements on the bridge, the first phase, and then again in 2000, we added a lot more to it. And then with the BRT down in the freeway and those connections back up there. And then just recently, there was some state money available to finally add some of the artwork to it that we had planned for in 2000. And it finally got up there, so you can go see those things if you haven't been up there lately. But we finally got what were regular vinyl banners we had on the University Avenue portion of it that we got them into full steel ones because every time they wore out, nobody wanted to find any money to replace them. So it can be done, and it was Caltrans money. But the change in Caltrans at the headquarters level allows for this. And if you travel a lot of the rest of the United States, the Department of Transportation usually have much better ideas of design, and they do a lot more than California does, which is really unusual. California's really behind in that compared to like Arizona and Utah, places like that. They do that all the time. But Caltrans is starting to open the door on that. But they came to me and says, how can we make sure there's more art in our facilities? And said, well,
All I'm
stop
telling you
having,
is good luck.
yeah, we'll stop having engineers run all that. You know, the engineers see no value in that.
No, this is the landscape,
Yeah.
architecture.
Yeah, but they are very pounded down by the engineers, put it that way.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, it is starting to change. But all these things are really important to make these things activated, and it would be part of as we move forward with it. But we will try to emphasize that a little bit more.
Thank you.
Just following up on what Pete said, it seems like instead of spending millions on bridges with no payoff, yeah, why don't we start with the bridges that exist and activate them and demonstrate that it works, that it has some connection? Because you could build all these facilities, but unless there's other complementary elements to it, it's kind of wasted money. So,
Yeah.
but the government's not going to fund that sort of thing. So what do you make of the way to?
Who do you say wouldn't fund them?
Caltrans would not.
Well, no, they have programs
Activation.
for that. Not for the act. You can get some stuff in there on activation in order to make these things work as public spaces so that they don't get run over by homeless folks. So there are some programs that allow you to do that. So Caltrans has been coming around. Now, it doesn't help, when the state has surplus money, then you see some of that stuff flowing. But anytime they start going another direction, then you don't see much money in those programs. But we're talking about, if we get this into the park master plan, which is probably gonna take 4 years, and to find that money, you have to have a vision that's in an adopted plan where there's some consensus with it. And once you get that, then you really start writing the grants to try to find that
You
money.
had those bridges for 30 years and not a single step has been taken.
Well, I agree. I agree that, Park Boulevard needs to be improved, the pedestrian bridge needs to be improved, Sixth Avenue needs to be improved. And that's what's in our overall concept here. And those are the lower lying fruit.
Yeah.
But especially the connection between West Mesa and East Mesa when you're relying just Cabrillo, that's a pinch point. And the Olmsted brothers actually said, don't put it in the middle of the park with one bridge going to, because you're always gonna have problems with people getting there. And that's exactly what ended up happening. Yes.
I think the scenic value of the Marston Bridge especially is really great. All it takes is a walk through that area to recognize what a view that will be when it gets built. And having the amenities at the landing points and developing the Inspiration Point element of the park, which is really a cul-de-sac right now, but could be more of more like the Palisades is. Those are all real pluses to this. How do you carry it forward? What's your next step in promoting the concept?
Well, let's say Bankers Hill Group on the design review committee, and we've been watching things being done in Balboa Park and trying to comment on But we also have spent quite a bit of time on polling the community about what types of recreational activities they could see for West Mesa. So we started that process, and we actually asked the city about a year and a half ago through Uptown Planners and through Bankers Hill Group to prepare a precise plan for West Mesa. And so they didn't do that, but they're now doing a full Parks Master Plan. So we have that chance to insert it in the process. But at this point, because it touches on parkland, there's no way we could get anything done unless we get it in the master plan adopted in there. And so there's going to be a big gap here. But what I'm tired of happening is every time we've talked about certain things on West Mesa, one group of them saying, well, it's not in the park master plan, so you can't do it. And then we find things that are in the park master plan, they say, well, that's too old, we don't follow it. So it's just like, come on, guys. So we say, let's update this thing. It's, go back. I mean, it's dated '89, but most of that stuff was done in the early '80s. So it's a long time since anything's happened. And I'll tell you, even back to the Bartholomew plan and the other plans, nothing was really shown in the West Mesa. It was more like the front doorstep or the floor mat to the central Mesa. And so what's been happening along 6th and 5th and 4th, huge buildings going in there. A lot of money's being collected for park impact fees, and it's not being spent enough now. And so we're really trying to emphasize to them, you've got to spend this money where the impact is. You collected it for parks, why are you not investing in this area? So there's some money source, but our most important thing is to start this process, let the park master plan be the thing that gets all the public input on it, and see how it flows through. But unfortunately, it's going to be a ways down the line, but finding money takes a lot of years anyway.
Well, I was interested in your comment about design. You don't want to get ahead of yourself to kind of cut off the public's imagination. But you said, do we want it to fit with what's there, or do we want it to stand out on its own? And I think you have to think about it like the park is really a generational creation. In the teens, it's Spanish colonial. In the 30s, it's Art Deco. In the 60s, it's I-5, is like another whole aesthetic put in there. So that whatever we do now, I think should fit, personally, I would say should fit the design now. And there's an argument to be made there that those generational changes, there is no one style of Balboa Park that you have to adhere to. That you have to you're free to make your decisions based upon what the feeling of the public happens to be in the present, and looking into the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, but because 163 is historically designated as a scenic byway, they may come back and say, well, we don't want you to compete with Cabrillo Bridge, and so it might have to be a very simple and not taking your attention away, but still relate to the form, but not make it look like it's historically old. So we don't know what those guidelines would be, and I agree with everyone on the difficulty working Caltrans, but I've been bugging them for almost a year and a half to get someone to call me back
to find
out some of that.
Yeah.
I've never been able to get a call back.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
We collected some data on people's reaction to crossing the bridge over I-5. And it's actually pretty good. It's got a raised sidewalk on both sides.
Talking about Park Boulevard crossing.
Yes, over Park Boulevard. The biggest complaint was the sound.
Yeah.
And the dirt and coming from I-5. So one of the things as you consider the design of the bridge, look at it from the user, the pedestrian and bicycle user. And what if they are reacting to? It's not the bridge itself. It's actually, you need to mitigate, which we were trying to do, mitigate the horrible experience of walking that bridge and getting blasted by sound and dirt.
If you get a chance to look at El Cajon and University Avenue bridge decks, we put a glass panel up there and it dropped the decibels about 6 to 7 decibels.
Well, we were
So
doing
it did help.
We were doing the vinyl murals.
Right.
But unfortunately, they got slashed.
Has the notion of an aerial tram system just completely fallen off?
I haven't heard, Ron Roberts is the one who was pushing that, right? I haven't
Yeah.
heard much about Ron
And Ron
in the last
Roberts
several
retired.
years at all, so.
Did it just die?
I don't know, it died when he kind of retired.
Because, you know, if you think about a lot of the people who, you know, stay downtown and they take their kids or they go to Balboa Park, they hop in their car, and then like you referred to before, they surf around for parking, they find it, they get in, and then they go to see where after lunch they go somewhere else, right? But like, couldn't, you know, getting my comment about, do people really want to do a 6 mile round trip walking distance from downtown to Balboa Park to see things, even if we activate the West Mesa? But, you know, forward thinking places like Ljubljana and Cape Town and so many places have these systems that are a thing and amongst themselves to do, you know?
That's an easy way to get across that distance. It's probably less expensive too, but if it's just a short segment to solve that, that's gonna be difficult. If it's part of a bigger system, then it could really work. When the zoo was talking about doing their parking garage for Spanish villages, I was in there all the time giving some testimony. I said, well, wait a minute, why don't you guys just extend your sky tram across Florida Canyon on the landfill, do parking there, and then people come across and their experience starts when they leave the car coming over. But, you know, instead they wanted to, you know, basically rebuild the Spanish village, get a parking structure. It's never really happened, but, you know, it's that type of thing. Sometimes, you know, the logical solutions don't always come out, but.
Well, they weren't gonna change the village, they were just gonna put this underground
Yeah,
parking
next to it. Exactly.
Where's the nearest trolley stop to Balboa Park?
Gee,
The
that's
walking
interesting.
distance.
City out here.
Right.
So it's actually, smart corner.
Yeah.
But then you're gonna take Route 7, plus 7 all the way to President's Way.
And how many feet walk would that be to the park? Where
I'm sorry?
we're at now? The closest trolley stop, how long of a walk would it be?
It's about it's a little less than a mile.
But it's actually closer on that, and this, when I was on your walk, when we hit Russ Boulevard, I said, where do you guys think Balboa Park starts? Nobody knew it started there. So when you count that, from Smart Corner to Russ Boulevard, it's only really
Well,
a
I
few
make
hundred
the
feet.
same comment, you get to President's Way, and nobody knows that you actually are at the park. There's no welcome to Balboa Park, there's no structure, there's nothing.
There's one squeegee sign,
Where are we?
it's colored brown. Now, within the last year, they put up a welcome sign, but you have to have
Well, you need a map
great
to find the
awareness,
sign.
situational awareness to see it.
You know, Solana Beach did that beautiful little walkway with that art of sculptured or mosaic art.
There's a bike trail and walking trail.
Yeah, but it has an arch that
Oh,
says,
yeah.
you know, so the whole park could do something like that on the south end there.
Well, again, you need to identify real visual areas that draw you to it, and then you need to space out other interesting things along the way. And someone can end up doing several miles and not even realize they've done several miles. We give them enough, and they, like my grandkids, they complain, it's too far. What am I walking for? I could have just driven.
Well, it's too far if something is not
Right,
entertaining.
exactly.
You go to Disneyland, you never get bored. And you walk and walk and walk, there's no parking inside Disneyland. But people keep walking because they're entertained. But you go to Balboa Park, there's not much entertaining. That's the difference.
Like, what are some of the things that you're hearing from the community to activate the West Plaza? You said you were starting to.
You mean the West Plaza or the Marston Bridge?
Or the West Mesa.
The West Mesa.
Oh, no, we came up with a top list of 25 things that could go in there, and then the city's, the Balboa Park prioritization plan came back, and we sent all this into them. They came back and says, Bankers Hill wants more benches. And so, what are you talking about? I gave them 25 things, and this is the way you guys can handle the prioritization of doing West Mesa. So really disappointed in what happened in the plan. We sent it back and said, we spent like 6-7 months of a bunch of public meetings and tried to come up with, you know, sort of help people prioritize what they'd like to see in there. None of it got into that.
What were those kind of
Well,
things?
I'll tell you, the first thing was making it more of an emphasis on the urban tree canopy was one of the top things. Having some type of a Kate Sessions, kind of like whether it's an interpretive center or a volunteer center that you went to that had some Kate Sessions connections to it. Having a loop system for biking and walking, you have that now with Sixth Avenue from a pedestrian standpoint. Next to that, you could have the bike facility that does that. All along in the park master plan, had Balboa Drive was supposed to be shown as a separated facility. But that's where, when we brought that up to the city, when they did change the angle parking, they said, well, we don't follow that old plan because it's, so old. So, but anyway, some type of a loop system that goes all the way down the south end and comes all the way up to Euclid Street. That's a loop. Really, if the city wanted to do certain things, every major park in the nation blocks off their streets certain days out of the week to let the public come and use it. And that doesn't happen in Balboa Park. The whole loop, if they wanted to shut off all the traffic, would be perfect for that, but they haven't done that. So that loop system is important. A community center, community/recreation center, or multi-generational senior, and all the way child, young adult, teen center type of thing was a really high priority. Doing some more adventure activities next to where the small camp is at the north end. And basically make it so there's more access to, zip lines or climbing logs or balance beams, all that type of stuff was a high one. Universal access playground, much expanded from what's there. Right now, there's a lot of people that won't move into uptown because there's not many things for kids. But yet, you've got, urban living and the number of units that are going in, you really should be addressing that. So those are some of the ones that come off the top of my head. But we did have a good list of 25 of them. So. And Scott knows that when he was helping on the Hillcrest Focus Plan that turned into the Uptown Community Plan update, he came up with a whole mess of things that need to be done throughout the community. Even with all of the things that he had suggested, if you add all that up, it still only, with the future population, it still would only be 30% of the park requirement. Do everything in West Mesa and everything that he had suggested. So even if we do the things, we're still gonna have a major shortage.
But then I would argue too, just to tail on that, if you did a huge amount of, like a sports park and rec center in that area, you'll have a destination that multiple communities that don't have that this kind of facility from Golden Hill has some, but Greater North Park, Uptown, Old Town, that will need, their kids will be able to play soccer and be on Little League teams, if not in their community, the next community over. Instead of having to go to Peninsula or to go north of 8.
You have, like across the street, East Village Green. It's got exactly what you're talking about.
It has a 4 diamonds. That's what you need. You need 4 baseball diamonds and a soccer field on a Saturday for your kids to be able to go and play at those kind of things. And unfortunately, our communities don't have those.
Well, we do have the sensitivity of the character of West Mesa, which is really a nice setting as a park. It's mostly a linear thing that you move through and not a lot of things you stop and do. But there are some underutilized areas, especially the whole south end, that's really underutilized. So I think there are more active activities or active park and rec facilities that can go at that south end. And make sure you're preserving the original intent of what 6th Avenue looks like. I think you can do both of those. So.
I have a question about the politics of all this. I don't understand why the uptown people keep asking for more acres and they have a 1,200-acre park across the street. Why can't they just apply all of their money that they collect and that they can get from the city into improving West Mesa itself rather than to ask for a 1/10 of an acre here and there?
And that's a very good point. That was always, all the years I was involved in Uptown Planners, I was on it for at least 10 years, from 2002 to 2012, and we were always trying to get things put into West Mesa, developer impact fees. Every time it was shot down, says, that's a regional park, you can't put those things there. However, under the new Parks Master Plan, it was done for citywide, identifies places like the edges of Balboa Park should be used for neighborhood and community-based facilities, not just regional. But it's still an upward battle. Talking to some folks over there the other day, they didn't even realize that. They said, oh, you can't put those things in. I said, it's the adopted city parks master plan that says you need to do that. So, yeah, we were always prevented from having, you know, basically the only parks that Uptown has is Pioneer Park and Trolley Barn Park. That's it. And that Trolley Barn Park's right on the edge of that part of Uptown. So if you add those acres up, it's not much. Now we've got Olive Street Park that's coming online. There's a couple other facilities that are in there. But all along, it was always, we were told, one, that you got plenty of acres, so stop complaining about your park requirement. And in the same breath, it was, but you can't put those in Balboa Park. And that's where our land is. So that has changed now. You just have to, this park master plan that's coming up, you need to make sure that's.
But the money now is flowing citywide, isn't it? Just because you collected in Uptown, you can't spend it only in Uptown. Right?
There is at least commitments when a Uptown Community Plan was finally adopted, and they said, well, you guys aren't solving any of the park requirements. Said, oh, we'll make sure that the money collected is a priority in that area. And any area that is already very highly park deficient and is getting major growth is supposed to be towards the top of using that citywide money. So we just have to keep reminding the city council of that. Yes.
We live right near the park, and oftentimes you see lines of cars wanting to get into the park to full parking lots.
Park Boulevard.
Yeah, off Park Boulevard. I'm wondering, would pedestrian bridges alleviate the, a number of cars that try to get into the park, and where would they park if they wanted to use those pedestrian bridges?
The one that we had shown going across 163, the parking resources are already there. They're always not really utilized much at all along the roadway and then in parking lots. So that's a close distance getting across that bridge to Palisades. So that has a real good solution for parking for Central Mesa when you have certain things. It's also good to, you know, have more intensive uses down like a community center, because again, it's underutilized and there's plenty of areas for putting in additional parking. So that is pretty easy.
It would be paid parking though, right?
What's that?
It would be generally paid parking.
Well, in all the years I was on Balboa Park Committee, I was kind of a minority on that one. Says, geez, you know, I go out to, at the time, the Wild Animal Park, is what it's called, and I get a dirt parking space and I pay how much? I don't know, it's like $12 or something like that back then. But I come to the zoo and I don't pay anything? It's crazy. And then when you consider only about 15, 16% of the people that use Balboa Park are residents in the city of San Diego. And so we're all paying for Balboa Park in our property taxes and general fund money, but they're not collecting any money from all these folks coming in and out of the area. They're probably aghast at the fact that they come into such an intensive recreation area and don't have to pay. And you could certainly make it easy that people that have a zip code or a driver's license that proves it, they don't pay for parking, but others should. So
You have to figure out whether it's appropriate and moral and ethical. And that's always been the battle, and it will continue to be the battle. And you'll never see any meters.
But yet, you know, in the garage is part of the
zoo. Yeah.
well, not the zoo parking lot, the one at the Rose Garden. That was gonna be for paid parking. And when I was on Balboa Park Committee, I said, I liked a lot of what the plan did, but I didn't like certain things, and I was trying to point out that, okay, if you guys are gonna have that for pay, and at the time, nothing was improved in the Palisades parking lot, it was all parking. That's all free there, you got free everywhere around it. You think people are gonna go in the garage and pay when they'll just go around and around in circles in those other areas? So take that out, develop it what it was supposed to be as a plaza area, and that puts more incentive for them to use the parking lot.
So Mike, on that, I happen to know a lot about parking. I was very involved in that. The city is desperate for funds right now. There's floating an idea of doubling the rates on parking meters. Nearly all the parking meters in San Diego are in downtown and uptown. There's a handful in North Park, there's some in PV now. I'm actually advocating to our Councilman Whitburn that whatever's good for La Jolla is good for uptown and downtown.
Until they split off as their own city.
Well, but you've got 2 hour free parking there. Right now is the time to be talking about parking, including Balboa Park. I'm going to be arguing to Steve Whitburn that we should have not parking rates throughout Balboa Park, but the close-in, high turnover lots like behind the Oregon Pavilion and Palisades, right now is the time to be talking about that because they are talking about trying to generate revenue from parking, which doesn't require voters to act. It can be done strictly by the city council. So right now, we should be, right now is the time to be pushing that.
But I do think that residents, especially in a certain area, we all pay for everything at the zoo, all their utilities and everything. It's on our tax base. We shouldn't have to pay for parking, but someone's flying in from out of town, gets a rental car, comes up with a family, goes to museums, and they don't put much money into supporting the museums. It's a pretty minor amount of money they spend. If we're paying everything out of the general fund for Balboa Park, there ought to be another source for Balboa Park. I know that's sacrilege with a lot of people, but it's crazy that it's not considered that way.
And at this past week's Park and Rec Board meeting, Park and Rec told everybody that they're being asked from city, because of our current deficit problems, to do a 20% cut in the department on programs, services, and things. Because we weren't willing to tax ourselves.
You know, the irony is that there's hundreds of millions of dollars of impact fees in a bank account, getting 3% interest. And the city cannot get out of their own way to change whatever rules they need to change to actually make it happen. Build more parking at Balboa Park or around Balboa Park. Put a trolley system. Hundreds of millions of dollars, documented.
I know we have 10 million sitting there for Uptown, but we haven't been able to.
So, you know, a lot of it is just incompetency.
You should also never say parking alone.
That's not really true.
Because
It is true.
we're talking about access to the park. We're talking about bridges, on transit, bikes. We focus on the car and even more space in the park. We really need to get rid of the cars.
Yeah.
And utilize the parking that's already here. Up in City College, you have thousands of spaces that sit there empty evenings and weekends.
The other thing about parking, as soon as the word parking comes up, then the conversation goes on forever.
And we should talk about it.
Hey, Mike, could I bring you back to the bridges, taking your cue, you're right.
So many things.
There was a time when the south side of the Ford building, and this is analogous to opening up unused pieces of the park. You know, a building on that observation and inspiration point is underutilized because it's a cul-de-sac. So too, the Palisades in many ways is a cul-de-sac. There was a time when before the freeway, when you would go out of the Ford building and down into the 7 roads of California, North America, whatever the exhibit was.
Where they did the test driving, some of the
Right.
vehicles.
And that activity of, you know, in the 60s when I was growing up, that was Lover's Lane. You know, you could go and park there.
And you have personal experience from that.
I've been told. The great thing about a bridge that lands at the Ford building, at that section of the south side of the Air and Space Museum, is that you have a chance to feed traffic into the Palisades, develop a landing activity, and then over on the West Mesa where the bridge touches, you have that kind of activity that your Uptown Planning Group was discussing, and it becomes a magnet, not just for parking cars, but also for people to have activity. And that'll get those reluctant grandchildren across the bridge. And I like that concept tremendously.
Well, we could go on all day, but I think we've gotten